Okay guys, so in this video I wanted to cover a couple of things. Now, on the trigger mechanism that I'm using, it came with a wired heatsink. That is a heatsink that's not directly bolted to the PCB, that is the motherboard. It is instead without a heatsink right now because I went to adjust it and it broke. So I have decided I was going to put on a better heatsink anyway, so I've got this. In fact, I've got two of them. And so what I'm doing here is this is off a barbecue, guys. You can find barbecues thrown out all over the place, and these are plentiful and readily available for free. In addition, here's another one I'm going to set up. This will be the one I use on my motor. Now, what you can do, believe it or not, is wire it in. I can run a couple of wires to my motor, solder them on, and then solder them to the metal portion of this. This is just a skewer type that would normally sit in your meat and tell you the temperature, and now it can perform an even more useful function, though your wife may be upset. You just deny knowledge of its existence, and you should be okay. So these are going to be the two that I use to tell my temperature. This is going to tell me the temperature of the throttle to make sure I'm not overamping it. I'm also going to have a voltmeter on the throttle so I can monitor both its volts and temperature. Now, right now, I've got my soldering iron heating up, and all I've done here is bent a couple of these just barely enough that I can slide that in there and then force it down. And then I've glue gun glued it into place back here. Now, you might think that's good enough, but I'm actually going to put some solder here. It'll help with the heat transfer. And where you want the probe end is to be inside of the heatsink fins. So what's going to happen is this will sit on the bike, and the air will actually be hitting it this way and coming up this path, trapping itself here. So I may make a little shroud, a little aerodynamic shroud, so it covers the glue gun glue and you won't notice it. But this is a great one, guys. And you can see that it's showing a fairly high temperature for the circumstances, but it's because it's got cooling glue gun glue on it. And that was more than enough. It registers everything. It's actually a very sensitive one. And even though its low end is at 50 degrees, you don't have to worry about your temperature at 50 degrees. It's more like 150. And if you see it climbing over 100, it's time to start monitoring your temperature. So I'm going to put you guys on pause. Let's just check this first. Now, I just wanted to show you a good way to check if your soldering iron, see that? Right away it turns to solder. You know your soldering iron is ready. So I'm going to put this on pause. I'm going to quickly solder this and I'll get right back. Okay, so I've just finished. And I can feel the heatsink is a little warm, but not super hot. And take a look at the temperature, guys. That's from soldering it. And this is awesome because it shows me the temperature the heatsink got up to during soldering, which is actually a good way to monitor things, believe it or not. Anyway, it just proves that it works. As you can see, I've soldered it in there pretty well. There's a fair bit of solder there that makes proper contact, so the heat can transfer through there as well. It also makes it a little bit more resistant to taking the temperature of the wind, guys, because the wind won't actually hit this. I'm actually going to cover it, like I was saying, but this is it. So a very simple job. Took me all of 10 minutes. There's my soldering gun cooling down. Now, I did use a lot of solder, guys. This coil was more than double this size before I did this. You can see it's still just a smoking away. So that being said, it's not bad for the tip either, because all I really did was put a ton of solder onto it. So I don't need to re-tin my tip. I wasn't actually doing any real soldering with it. All I did was dump a whole bunch of solder in it. And all I did for this was put my soldering gun in, touch the metal here and here, and then just start feeding in solder, guys, once I let it warm up. And it's done a fine job. Now that this is finished, I have a nice setup that will stay intact. I should add some more glue gun glue down in there just to make sure it's as solid as it can be. I just put a bunch of big drips and let it drip in, put some more inside here, and that's working. It's rock solid now, so I don't have to worry about it going anywhere. I will add some more just for safety's sake, but I just wanted to cover this real quick. This is a big heatsink, guys. This came out of a computer motherboard. You can see there was a chip attached to it here. I've got holes drilled in it so that I can attach it, and it's going to be a sweet setup. So I wanted to cover some other things I could have done. I've got this little guy, also out of a computer, off of a chip. And this is an okay heatsink, but it's nowhere near as good as this, guys. I'm going to be undervolting, but over amping this system, so I want as good a cooling as I can get. Keith out.